Well, good afternoon and a massive welcome to our latest e-commerce world review webinar on one of the hottest topics in retail, namely sustainability and the future of sustainability, which we hope will be sustained, circular and fully replenishing. So it's a great pleasure today to have this report, which is hot off the press, just been released and very highly anticipated. But even more important than the report for the next half hour is the fact that I'm joined in the studio by two lovely people. Firstly, Emma, who is our executive editor and the person who wrote the report. So it's a great pleasure to have Emma with us, and Patrick from PFS, one of our partners. So now you've seen the picture, let's meet the real people in real life. Patrick, Emma, welcome to the studio both. Patrick, why don't you kick off, tell everyone a little bit about you and something as well about PFS, which we now see as a GXO company.
Thanks for having me, Ian. So Patrick Lowe, I lead our business development practice at PFS, a GXO company. I've been with the company for 12 years, really spending time working closely with our clients, specifically on sustainability initiatives, which has become an increasingly hot topic, as you mentioned, Ian. So PFS is a leading operations company supporting brands and retail partners in e-commerce and business-to-business fulfillment, as well as order management, customer service, and credit financial service operations.
Great. Well, look, welcome, Patrick. It's great for you to join us. Emma, I'm sure most people know who you are already, but a quick thumbnail and maybe just tell us what was top of your mind as you came to write what is probably our third or fourth annual sustainability report. Just give us that headline after you've introduced yourself.
Thanks, Ian. Hi, Patrick. Ian says, I'm Emma Herod. I'm one of the editors here at Internet Retailing and Retail X and author of this sustainability report. It's interesting looking at this report, how the industry is moving on and how a lot of the background work the retailers have been doing is now coming to the fore and actually being shown in consumer-facing ways. A lot of those we're going to come on to during the webinar.
Wonderful. Now, one of the conversations we have behind the scenes, and Patrick, you've sort of pointed me at it, is that when we're chatting with retailers, nearly without exception, they would rank sustainability and purposefulness as one of their top three priorities. But we don't find many people with a job title called sustainability is my problem and I have the P&L to prove it. So you've been doing this for a long time. Can you maybe characterize who's driving the sustainability conversation, and has that changed or expanded in your time doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's an interesting landscape as you consider the differences between some of the companies that, one, we to their point of view on how they're not only addressing sustainability and ESG as an overarching topic, but then how they're putting resources behind that. What we're finding more and more is that the consumers are really driving expectations around communication on these topics, specifically as they engage with brands and retailers. They have an expectation that there is a commitment to sustainability and improvement in supply chain around these efforts. And I think that brands and retailers have responded to that by, in some cases, assigning resources. So you are seeing more titles, a CSO or a chief compliance officer of ESG becoming more prevalent. But I really do believe that it's starting with consumers' expectations, especially as the younger generations start to come into more disposable income. And we know that as you look at the data, those younger generations have higher expectations for the brands that they purchase from. And I think you're seeing companies respond to that now, not only in the internal structure, but also the communication and the way that they're allowing their consumers to interact with the brand.
Great. Well, look, I think you've set up a number of the topics there that Emma's going to take us through. I should say that a number of you will have signed up for this because you thought, haha, I've already signed up for the report. I'd like to see it brought to life. Others of you are thinking, oh, what report? Fear not. It will be emailed to you immediately following broadcast. So relax. If you're looking at this on YouTube in eons and generations to come, then you'll have to look underneath in the notes at the URL, but do get your hands on the report. So Emma, why don't you drive? I'm just going to throw up a slide and just take us through your highlights. We're not going to do the whole report. It's too big, too complex. So we've just picked a few things that you wanted to share with us. So Emma, over to you.
Yeah, it's interesting what Patrick was saying about consumers driving the change towards sustainability within retail organisations, because on the other side of things, retailers are also being pressured into change through legislation, some of which they're actually driving themselves, pushing for these things to happen. I've just picked out a few that are happening within Europe, so some of them specific countries, some of them Europe-wide. Sustainability reporting, for example, the EU is driving for that to be standardised across the EU, but linking in with international platforms and ways of reporting risks, opportunities that retailers are already used to doing through financial end of year reporting. Picture on the screen, France, the first country to introduce legislation where retailers or fashion retailers have to show the material that products are made from, how they can be recycled, and where the products were actually manufactured. So lots of information that will take that product from the shop through to the consumer wear, through to being recycled or resold at the end of its useful life. And of course, it's not just fashion retailers within France. This is going to impact any retailer or any brand wanting to sell into France is going to have to follow that legislation. And there is talk about that then being expanded to other sectors, furniture, consumer electronics, etc.
And operationally, we've been seeing things like embroidered 2D barcodes, RFID embedded in garments and so on. So once you've bought this and the information is off the website and no more, are we seeing moves as well then for that data to follow the products through the whole life cycle?
It will do, and that's where other industries are having to become involved in what are being called digital product passports. So if you think about the full recycling industry, products have to be made in a way that they can be disassembled and their component parts then recycled or made into new items. So that has to follow it through, or from a resale point of view, it would help authenticate the product.
And there's an interesting intersection here between transparency, sustainability laws, and then some of the EU-wide anti-competition legislation. So, for example, with a very famous mobile phone manufacturer, focus on allowing third parties to repair, ensuring that batteries are replaceable and recyclable, and so on. So, a push, if you like, to use both, compliance in different areas to achieve similar objectives. So a lot of tiptoeing and understanding and balancing, not just for yourself, but with your supply chain partners.
Absolutely. And this whole thing of sustainability is including everybody in that cycle.
Yeah. Ian, to maybe provide a little color context on that. So as these companies begin, and there's different levels of maturation on their ESG journey, and certainly as it relates to sustainability, establishing and achieving science-based targets, what's interesting to consider in that is that as you get, not to get too far into detail, but as you talk about scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, those are very easy in theory for companies to calculate because they are direct and indirect usage within their plants, within their operations. But as you go further and you talk about scope 3 calculations and science-based targets based on scope 3 level emissions, that really deals with all of the upstream and downstream supply chain interactions from the point of manufacturing all the way through distribution to how the consumer interacts with the product and the end of life. So it's a very complex level of calculus for these companies and retail partners to be able to understand the full end-to-end spectrum of the products that they're moving and selling.
Yes, the world doesn't get any simpler, and it's no more isolated. That's probably a good thing. Emma, this is a rather fearsome looking chart. Why have you selected this?
This is an overview of a big component of the research that we've done. We've taken the RetailX Global Top 1000, so the leading retailers and brands that are selling online around the world. And we've investigated their sustainability criteria, how they're showing and sharing their sustainability journeys with consumers, and going some part into those circular models that we've been talking about. But to share some of the figures rather than expecting everybody to look down into our what's possibly a small chart on a screen. Obviously, it's in the report, and we then break it down into further areas, looking at specific sectors, geographies, how they compare and contrast. So 11.4% of the world's leading brands and retailers outline their sustainability goals and commitments on their e-commerce sites. So this, as I mentioned, is on the consumer-facing e-commerce site, as opposed to their corporate site, where they'd be sharing information with investors and other stakeholders. Some make the information prominent. Some of it might be in the top navigation, in the footer. Others share a lot less information. Some share full details of how they're actually going to achieve those targets. Some retailers are updating it on a regular basis. So there is a complete contrast across industries, across sectors. Fashion retailers, for example, are more likely to share sustainability targets with consumers than other retailers, as they appreciate and understand how that journey is of interest to especially the millennials and the Gen Z that are shopping from them. Some of the other statistics we've got, what have we got?
And Emma, while you move forward, one of the most striking things to me from the previous graph, if you looked at the very bottom bar, the number or the percentage of retailers that have a CSR sustainability point of contact, that's not even indicating that they have a named chief sustainability officer or a team around that. It's just identifying, do you have a point of contact that owns this for your organization, is less than 1%. I would expect that you're going to see a significant jump in that percentage over the next 3 to 5 years, certainly as we get closer to the end of this decade. And if you look at some of the leaders in the space, what they're saying is, by 2030, we will do this, or by 2040, we will be carbon neutral. And it's going to become a more important role as an operational process for companies, not only the retailers themselves, but all of their partners, to have somebody in that position to lead these efforts.
And it's interesting if you compare that with, say, customer service. So it's odd for you to have a named customer service, sort of chief customer service officer, because the autonomy and the training in customer service has been pushed to the front lines. So, one of the additional challenges of CSR is, if you imagine walking into a multi-category supermarket or multi-category store, you have a member of staff who might be asked 1 minute about how to wash clothes, the fit of them, is it organic cotton, can I recycle it? And the next minute might be being asked about the salt content of a ready meal and whether it's organic and fair trade. And so I think one of the other challenges, I think, that's hidden behind this, and we don't have a way to measure it, is the extent to which frontline staff can carry these complex whole supply chain messages for every touch point and every customer question across all channels all the time. And so again, I think there's a bit of an inversion happening here where it can't just be top down. I mean, imagine you go to a brand that you admire and you ask about something, the store, someone rolls their eyes and says, no, that's just all nonsense. That would be the end of your belief in that brand. So I think it's quite interesting. And we are fishing for a way to look at, how well these messages are lived and breathed by frontline staff. So if anyone's got any ideas of how to do that, drop me a note, research@retailx.net, and I'll be very happy to take your good ideas with maybe a little credit. Anyway, so we jumped back to that, moved on too quickly there. So I think we looked on this one of the plans of action by sector, Emma.
Yeah, that's interesting. We were saying there, reading about how we're trying to track how the frontline staff are sharing these stories with consumers, because that's one of the things that a few of the retailers I was talking to in the report have also said, that it's now time to hand on sustainability rather than looking at it as sort of however many millions of tons of CO2, and handing it over to marketing to make it into stories that connect with consumers' hearts, with the emotions, and also sharing further what it actually means and what consumers can do to help themselves. So
it's interesting. So I was interested you say that, because one of the first discussions we had about this was, well, fashion has to be upfront about it because they get most criticism. And then we were saying, well, maybe the consumer just doesn't believe anything anyway. But in this chart, we've been looking at the consumer's view of the information they want. So just talk us through the implications of this.
Well, there we've got the retailers trying to share this information. More retailers will say this is our top line goal than actually this is how we're going to achieve it. As say on the chart, consumers are saying that the environmental impact of the products needs to be clearer when they come to decide what they're actually going to buy. And it's actually difficult then getting those two sides together in a simple way. If you think about the size of product packaging, is it better from a food point of view to have like a traffic light system to show people how much salt or sugar or the environmental impact of a food product? With online, there's more scope to share that story, but are consumers actually going to go and look at it anyway? Because we do know there's that attitude behaviour gap between what consumers say they're going to do, what they're going to be interested in, and actually whether they go and look at it before deciding to buy. Yes.
But I'd be interested to get your views on this, because having presented a similar, I think it was from last year's report slide before, there was a general rolling of eyes where people said, yeah, but they say it, but they don't do. And I was reminding people that if you look at the millennials and Gen X, high spending, buying for families, this is the core, if you like, of customer profitability. If a third of them say that the ecological impact needs to be made clear so they can decide, in a way, I don't think you need to say it doesn't matter whether 30% of them do or don't do it. In retail, we deal with 1% either way. Is a major move. Supermarkets have a 2 to 3% net margin, so 1% is a transformational amount of extra revenue. So I do think that there's a point where I no longer overstate the gap between perception, also intention and action. Provided you can offer them the data, why wouldn't you? Because it's better to do without the uplift, but also not alienate the customer. I mean, Patrick, in your experience, are people journeying in hope and positivity, or is there a level of cynicism and let's be the last mover on this?
I think the right answer is probably somewhere in the middle. The companies that are doing it well are approaching it with a level of authenticity. So it's not cynicism, and it's not that we want to be the last to get on board. Many also don't want to be the bleeding edge and out on the forefront of these initiatives. But I think what consumers expect, and what you can see it in the data, as consumers are saying they're willing to spend more, they're willing to choose more sustainable options. They're also purchasing and consuming out of necessity. So there's a pinch point when it comes to how long am I willing to wait, or how much am I willing to pay for a better option. But I believe that the companies that are doing this the best are saying it is a journey and we're not at the finish line, but we are making progress in the right way and communicating that clearly to their consumers. I think that's where you're at a point where consumers today are willing to accept that authenticity, and understanding that as a culture, as a planet, we're not at the end of our journey around sustainability. In fact, it's a never-ending journey. But I do feel that there are two levels of perhaps where companies are misstepping. One is stepping way too far out and being a company that can be accused of greenwashing, making claims and targets that there's no real meaningful tactical plan to achieve. And then alternatively, sitting on the sidelines and not engaging in the discussion at all. Consumers expect something in the middle at this point.
Okay, good. Now, Emma, you were talking about, you picked out this idea of simple steps. So we have a very nice graphic. Tell us what these small changes are, because they both look really intriguing.
Yeah, well, looked into how some of the retailers, leading retailers, are nudging consumers into new behaviour. Two of the ones I've picked out, one, Chinese on-demand food delivery service. Their app would automatically calculate how many sets of cutlery a customer would want based on what they were ordering. That's in the past. But now they've switched their app so that the default is no cutlery, and the customer has to manually enter if they need some. So this is, now if you think about China and population, number of people that are ordering online, this Chinese company, LME, found that 21.75 billion sets of single-use cutlery could be saved each year by changing that.
Wow. That is a lot of cutlery.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And there'll be a lot of turtles in the ocean without cutlery now. And on the right, we have what looks like an M&S bag.
So, click and collect. Your order normally comes in a plastic bag when you go and pick it up in store. M&S have introduced a system now whereby the orders come into store, or they're picked in store in a reusable bag. When the customer comes in to collect it, it's taken out of that reusable bag, and the customer has been notified to bring their own bag in to carry their product home. Saving there 10 million plastic bags a year.
And isn't M&S also working on super heavy duty, long life paper bags as well that look a bit plasticky, or did I totally invent that for them?
Oh, I don't know that one, Patrick.
Fine. If we weren't live, I'd edit that out. But since it's my brain, it's now shared with everybody else's brain. Yes, we'll find out later. Now, next topic up is once you've done the buying, if you're not picking up in store, it's the gettingness of product via home delivery. What are we seeing here, Emma?
Right. Well, consumers have been saying for a long time that they want less packaging, they want reusable packaging, they want orders delivered fast, free, and sustainably. So there was another study's been done in the Netherlands where they've been looking at again this default on apps and mobile commerce sites, is that if they tick by default the more sustainable delivery method, then consumers are more likely to choose it. They also show other ways of explaining the environmental impact, again, consumers are more likely to choose it. So going back into the M&S and the LME applications there, it's showing that consumers can be made to change and nudged into changing, which can have a big impact across wide areas.
But again, Patrick, the nudging here, it's such a small word, but in order to nudge, I have to know where the product is, what the service level being promised is, where Emma is, what my delivery options are, what the cost of various routing options are, and then auto tick a box. So, behind this apparent nudge is an awful lot of number crunching, data availability. These are very complicated things that look very simple.
Certainly, and Emma said it. So consumers expect fast, free, and sustainable. Those are competing priorities as we look at the legacy setup of operations and supply chain. And for years, consumers have been asked to pick one of the three. It may be in some cases two of the three, but certainly rarely all three is an option. Amazon does a phenomenal job of this today when you talk about the gentle nudge. So if you shop with Amazon and you have multiple orders, Amazon will nudge you to aggregate your orders and pick a single delivery day. So in theory, fewer trucks on the road, consolidated delivery, fewer carbon emissions. That works really well for Amazon because it is free shipping most of the time for Prime consumers. They're not drastically discounting the delivery time frame. It may be a day or two later. And now I have this feeling like I'm contributing to sustainability because my house isn't the one that's getting 4 or 5 boxes at a time. It's one box.
Yeah.
Those
but you still have the doorbell ringing for your neighbors who have, 3 deliveries a day.
That's exactly right. So those are the types of nudges that I think consumers are willing to accept at this stage. And many other brands are doing this where you're saying it's going to be slightly slower delivery, but it's a more sustainable or more eco-friendly delivery option. Again, if it's not something I need today, I'm probably willing to accept that. In other cases, if I need it urgently, I don't know that I'm going to opt in for that option. Certainly if there's an added cost or a significant delay in the delivery timeframe.
Yes, exactly. And I think when I first saw that, would you like to have it done, on your Prime Day delivery? My initial thought was, this is just them trying to manipulate me to increase their margin.
Sure.
But of course, post-COVID, when people aren't at home all day, then it's actually a total pain having multiple deliveries end up with a neighbor around the corner. So there is a part as well of delivery which is around predictability and a convenient time, not just out and out speed. So that's very interesting.
Sorry, Ian, just to add to that, what we are seeing from our partners is that predictability is the number one factor in the delivery expectation. In addition to being free, the idea of being fast is now a little more flexible, so long as you're predictable for exactly that reason. I'm okay with the timing so long as I know exactly when it's going to come.
Great. Now you, Emma, just moving us along, you have singled out one of my favorite current London examples, which is Selfridges and their reselfridges, which is a very ambitious and fully committed approach. Tell us about it and why you've singled it out.
Yeah, well, I've chosen Selfridges because we're seeing retailers online bringing in a resale model or rental, and just sort of picking one or other of the circular models. Selfridges have gone all in, really. They've set a target that 45% of transactions will come from what it's calling reselfridges, so it's circular model by 2030. Huge amount of the business. But it's also not just operating a resale service. It's doing rental, repair, refill, and recycling. And that's across online and bricks and mortar channels.
And again, just linking bricks and mortar with online is one challenge across all of these different workflows. But I think the other thing that's interesting is for people who know the Selfridges store, it takes up a whole city block, and the prime entrance, very much on the front corner of Selfridges, is dedicated to this re-Selfridges area. So it's not that this is something, there's a tick box that's put on the bottom of the basement, just next to the toilets. They're very much building this in as part of how they're fronting up to consumers, and I think changing and setting perceptions as much as anything else.
It also shows how they're understanding the market, because the luxury resale market is going to be growing 5 times faster than the overall luxury market through to 2025. Rental resale potential to take 23% of the global market by 2030.
So a good combination of values and commercial value there as well. And just to finish us off, you had another slide which has regenerative as well as recycled. So tell us who and what.
VF Corporation, they own Vans, North Face, Timberland brands, amongst others. I was speaking to David Quass, who's their Senior Director of Sustainability in EMEA. So we spoke about different materials and how they're actually incorporating them into the design of products, because some things like recycled polyester, there is already a market for that. That's something that they can access at scale and at a price that's competitive with what used to be used. But other things are more experimental, like fibre made from carbon horrible emitting chimneys, say it that way, and products made from mushrooms and leather from orange peel, all those sorts of stuff. So those things are taking longer to actually come to fruition and to be used within products. They're also looking at getting higher yields, and rather than just what you can take from the earth, how you can also give back in the regenerative agriculture way. So growing different plants or coffee, for example, in between rubber trees. So both sides get a higher yield, it's better for the earth. And also then you have to have the collaboration across different industries, with the industry using the rubber needing to talk to the coffee producers. So it's large, wide scale, sort of cross global supply chains that are having to come together in these ways as well.
So yet again, collaboration and also a lot of horizontal collaboration, collaboration outside of your own organization and outside of those highly optimized supply chains that professionals for the last century would have cut their teeth on. So a number of changes there. Well, look, Emma, you've covered some really lovely things plucked out from the report. So thank you for that. Patrick, is there anything that struck you from the report that you think, we didn't have a slide on it, but I can't leave without mentioning it?
Really, from my perspective and where we're putting our efforts is around optimizing a couple of things. One is global inventory for these brands and retails is a significant cost. So being able to unlock that and offer it to consumers not only supports the endless aisle process, but also being able to do that in a sustainable manner not only brings value to the company, but it brings value to the consumer. So I think that's where we're really seeing a lot of aggressive willingness to lean forward into things like multi-node fulfillment, things like leaner supply chains. So that would be one. And then the second point is, I think the core theme is, at the end of the day, it still is a consumer-driven behavior, and it's based on how we can get supply to the group that is demanding that supply in the most sustainable way, and also encourage them to be thinking about this. So
Yeah.
it's definitely, we're still on I would say, the beginning of what's going to be some pretty radical change over the next 10 to 20 years.
Excellent. Well, look, as the water-based ink dries on the carbon neutral PDF of this report, Emma, you're already planning next year's. There's no rest for the wicked. So any hints about things you think are going to be featuring in your research and the 2024 report? Any early hints on that?
Well, no hints as such, but what I'm hoping for is to see all of the percentages of how retailers are sharing their sustainability journeys with consumers on the rise, more models of circularity being shown, and generally everybody moving closer and closer with what they're doing towards 2030 and actually seeing some real action.
Great. Well, look, that's a very positive note. So listen, time is against us. There's nothing circular about the effluxion of time. So I just want to say a massive thank you, Emma, firstly for writing the report, and secondly for sharing it with us. Patrick, for partnering and your support on the work, as well as joining us and giving us so many insights today. So thank you to you both. The URL is there. As I said, don't worry if you're watching this live, your follow-up email will include that so you can get your own copy, ideal for sharing with loved ones in the coming festive season. So big thank you from everyone in the studio. Do let us know what you think, where you would like us to focus our research. As I said, drop us a note, research@retailx.net. We'd be very pleased to hear from you. But until then, thank you very much for joining us.